Look, I get it. Nighthawk 117, based off of the F-117 Nighthawk jet. I see the resemblance, but I'm always going to see Nightwing. So today we have a case from Rosewil called the Nighthawk 117. It's a full tower offering from them, and I've got to say, the design, it looks cool. It's a little bit on the edge of flashy, but it's not over the top flashy, but it does look sharp. It's a full tower offering. It's going to have a lot of room. Looks like it's going to have some good airflow. We're going to have to see how it measures up, though, because when it comes to computer cases, there is some pretty stiff competition. Okay, first let's get started with the packaging and how this came in and take a look at what they're doing. Now, Rosewil, they're a company that tries to offer PC enthusiasts, gamers, so on and so forth. They're trying to offer products that compare on a price level but are still good quality. And in general, I've really liked what Rosewil's done. So I can't say that they haven't succeeded in their goal most of the time. Now, that being said, is it enough to make somebody buy the case? Now, when I got a hold of this guy, first off, it came out packaged really well. I did like that. There was one minor thing I noticed in the unboxing, and that was that on this glass side, or well, more like a plexiglass side panel, there's a couple of plastic connectors that had cracked from the shipping. Now, I live out in the boonies of Rangeley, and the roads are pretty rough, so I wasn't even a bit surprised. It doesn't even bother me. It's not something I would care about, but I did reach out to Rosewil, who told me that they would easily swap out the case if it was a big enough complaint, or for those of us who wouldn't want to send out a case back and pay for that shipping, they could even just replace the side panel. That was the only thing I noticed coming right out of the box. This thing is packaged excellently. If anything, it's just the metal connectors were just a little too tight, and that caused a little bit of tension. Bump or two might have cracked a few, and I bet that wouldn't be the case in every case. Other things I really liked about this case, and some things that caught my eye, and I was like, this is looking good. The cable management throughout the interior looked excellent. I was really impressed with it. They've got very nice large-sized rubber grommets type things inside the holes that give you ample room to slip your cables through. And I really appreciate that. Trying to slip a connector through a hole can be really difficult sometimes if they're too tight. So making these things really huge was good. The design looks great. I think it's an excellent design. It does say, hey, I'm a gaming chassis, but it's not so over-the-top flashy that it could detract from the build. The panel here on the side is nice and big. You can see inside your computer great. I think they did a good job on that. They got some fun LEDs on the top. I wasn't sure that much at first how much I was going to really appreciate it, but they had some blue and red and white LEDs going across the top between the power button, the hard drive light, and then just some little extra aesthetics of some lighting up top. But it kind of gives it a jet feel instead of a computer case, and so I was kind of like, I kind of understand why they did that. Might not be everybody's favorite, but hey, it'll work. Another fun feature was the ability to open up the vents on the top. It not only makes the case look a little bit more like that F-117 Nighthawk, but you know, it gives you the option to have a little more of a enclosed silent feel, or a little bit more airflow if you want to stick like anywhere from up to a 280 millimeter closed loop cooler, or all in one, and have that radiator in the top blowing out the top. One thing that the Nighthawk does that I thought was really cool is they do have an external hard drive mount right there on the top of the case. So if you need to just plug in, hot swap a drive real quick, throw it on there, try to pull your files off, and you don't want to have to open up your panels, but you would love to be able to just pull files off of another drive. You got a bunch of drives where you occasionally have to pull things off of them. That's a really great feature. I actually really like that. I think it's a great idea. It's probably the #1 standout feature on this case. But once you get past that, you're looking at a pretty standard case. You do have lots of hard drive bays. you do have a decent, about a 3/4, 5 and 5 1/4 inch bay drives. Pretty standard. Um, it's it's nothing that's going to stand out and say, hey, I'm really changing the market. But at the same time, it's got very solid features that say, hey, this is a decent case. So let's go ahead and go on to the build and see how these things actually came to play when I was putting it together. Okay guys, I know I said I was going to get to the build, but I got one thing that I need to get off my chest. It's election season. And I'm going to go ahead and run for president. And I have one platform. I will end Molex connectors. I will make them illegal. In the world, nobody is allowed to use Molex connectors. Now, okay, I'm not really running for president. And no, I can't ban Molex connectors. And I understand. Sometimes we've got stuff that we need those Molex connectors. But if there's one thing I really did not like, it's the fan controllers and the hard drive SATA power connector all ended up ending in a Molex connector instead of SATA power. And I don't know what it is about Molex, and I hope I'm not the only one, but I can't get them things to plug in. I mean, I'm fiddling with them. I twist the wires. I try to get the thing. It takes me forever to plug the stupid things in. I really wish they'd use SATA connectors for the power. Minor complaint, and I understand why they do Molex. You can't always assume that people have power supplies that have that many SATA power connectors when their people can be very easily using their older power supplies, and they may only have 3 or 4 SATAs that need to go to their drives, so they need the Molex to be able to handle the rest of stuff. So while it's something I would like to see change, and I'm seeing some people move away from that and just say, we're done with Molex, we're going to SATA power. And I'm so glad to see that. I understand why ROSEWILL did that, and I won't take points off because of it. Okay, now that I'm done with my campaign spiel, let me talk about how this build went. So the build went excellently. In fact, there was a point where I started feeling like, this case is designed really well, but because it's not anything new or super fancy, it's not breaking any ground per se compared to some other cases, I started to think, really, how great is it? And then I started getting stuff inside of it, and I was like, never mind. It's the little things that ROSEWILL did that really makes this case a great case and something that I was really appreciating. So let me mention a couple of those things. One of the first things that I really like their design, it's one of the best I've ever seen, is their 5 1/4 inch drive bay connectors. Now, they have the clip-in ones, the toolless, you can just snap in a clip, and it holds your drive in place. And those things can work, but a lot of them that I've played with in the past, they're kind of loose, and you can kind of feel a little jiggle with the drive, and it just doesn't seem like it's very, very secure. Not with this case. When I snapped those clips in, that drive was just rock solid held in there, and I was like, wow, that is impressive. I really like that. And then when I'm reaching in the back plugging in cables, I did hear a couple of clicks where it turned out I didn't quite get on one side of my drive. I didn't quite get the pins in, but as soon as I pushed on the back of the drive, it popped right in, and that drive was just secure. I mean, it doesn't jiggle, it doesn't move. I really, really like that about that. The other thing that I think they did an excellent job on. So they do have the option to have plenty of hard drive bays. So if you're running, a couple of raids and you need anywhere from 6, 7, 8 drives in your system, you're going to have some room for that. But if you just want better airflow, especially trying to get to your graphics cards and you're only running 1 or 2 drives, you can pull out that middle cage and it's nice and clean. It opens up the case very nicely, gets that one top fan just blowing right across, and it does great. Outside of that, the slide-in, the drive cages that slide into, well, I guess it's the clip that slides into the cage, but those clips were really solid. They held onto the drive really well. Once they slide in, they snap very well once they're in place. Just really, really good design. Everything felt very top quality, and nothing felt flimsy, and nothing felt like it didn't really quite fit or it was a little loose or anything. So those little details matter when you're building. It makes it just feel so much better when it feels like your parts are just being cradled properly where they're supposed to be. But that wasn't the other thing. Now I talked about how big the cable management holes were for running your things like your power supply connectors and stuff. While I was building the case and I got to the back part and was trying to kind of manage those cables, and I never do a super extensive cable manage job. In other words, I don't wire tie everything and try to make it super straight. A, some of that helps when you can custom mod your cables. B, a lot of that takes a ton of time, and when you're just moving your build in and out of one system to the next, it's not something that I'd usually have time to do. So I usually do it neat enough. But I definitely want the inside of my build that you can see through this glass panel. It needs to look nice. As I was organizing those cables on the back, I kind of was like, I'm not sure I'm liking the way these cables are working out. I'm kind of having to push them here, push them there. Not too sure about this. And then I put the rear panel back on the case, and I was like, whoa, Rosewill, you did great. Lots of room back there. I had no trouble popping the lid on. And here's the other great thing. You don't slide the panel on. It's one of those ones that you can just connect it right up in the front, and then it just kind of hinges back, which just makes it so much easier to put those panels on. Those little details may seem like minor things, but I promise you, when you're in the middle of a build, they make a huge difference. And I have to say, Rosewill did an excellent job on that. Outside of that, we just had tons and tons of room. You've got ample space for ATX motherboards. You can fit eATX motherboards in there. The cable management worked excellently. I really loved how easy it was to route everything and keep it looking really clean. So my build turned out great. I have a Sapphire R9290 Vapor X in there, which is a full graphics card. And it's got plenty of room. I threw a Corsair H110i GTX cooler, had no trouble putting a radiator in the top, and that's great. I like it when they give you ample room so that you can easily screw the radiator up top and you're not having problems. And then I realized that, I wanted to show what a tower cooler looks like, and I'd forgotten to put it on. That's okay. I just slapped the tower right on top of the heat sink on my north bridge there, and yeah, there was still room to spare. And I have a Noctua NHU14S. It's one of the taller tower coolers you can get. You are not going to have space problems in this case. So the build actually went really well. And even though the Nighthawk doesn't have necessarily a super standout feature, it does really well. And the build was very pleasant. I had a great time putting my system in this rig. So Nighthawk, excellent case. It's doing really well. Okay, we're getting pretty close to wrapping this up, but there is one last thing I do need to mention. There was one problem I had with the external hard drive port on the top of the case. I tried to slam a hard drive in there, and it was really tight. And I don't know what happened. It's probably just a manufacturing glitch. It could be even just specifically related to my case. But the mount in there was just a little too close to the sidewall, which means that when I was trying to slide that hard drive in, it was really hard to get it to actually connect. And I'm pretty sure if I got in there, did a little bit of drilling or something, I could probably fix it pretty easily. I couldn't get a laptop hard drive to jump in there. And I feel like it would be something that would be very easy to fix, which would simply be just making the holes a little bit wider than your standard factor hard drives, because the way they slide into the slot, it's not like they're going to go anywhere really anyway. Now granted, you don't want the hard drive to get bumped and moved around while you're transferring stuff, so I get needing to have the slot tight, but with my particular case, my connector wasn't lined up right, and so I wasn't able to get the hard drives to really snap down in there without fighting with it. So that's something that might be something of a bit of concern if that is like your number one feature. At the same time, I don't feel like it'd be very hard to get inside the panel and just slide it over a little bit to where you could make it work anyway. But something I felt like I needed to mention. Okay, so now that we've gone through the case, gone through the features, looked at the build, the real question comes down to is hey, is this case worth it? Should you buy it? Well, let's take a look at that. First off, on Newegg, which obviously Rosewill is a Newegg exclusive, but on Newegg this case lists for 120 bucks. For full tower case, you're going to be doing pretty well to find a case that's just cheaper than that on a full tower in general. And there is some cases that when I was price shopping, there are definitely cases that are in that ballpark, but you're not going to find that very easily. So I got to say that right off the bat, Rosewill's got a really good price point. I don't feel like they're doing anything wrong there. Is that price worth it? I'm kind of thinking it is. And honestly, the case is very sturdy. They've got good solid steel panels in there. Everything connects well. You know, I've already mentioned just how well things like the drive connectors and such do. So overall, I don't feel like they've really skimped on anything super hardcore. Now, you're not going to be getting a $400 case here, and you're not going to have absolute top of the line everything, but it's solid, and I don't feel like it's cheap. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels like a nice case. So I think they're doing well there. I think the biggest problem that the ROSEWILL Nighthawk has, and it's not even its fault, and that's just really NZXT. NZXT is a super hard company to compete with right now. They've got a lot of, and there's just a lot of mid-tower offerings that while they don't have quite as much space as the Nighthawk does, they're still very comparable even for being mid-towers. And so when you start looking at some of those mid-tower offerings that are around 100, 110 bucks, that's when you're starting to be like, well, I don't know. Should I go for the full tower? Should I maybe go for something that has maybe a few more features and is a little cheaper? And that can be a hard choice. But overall, if you're looking for a full tower, let me just explain the benefits of a full tower. You have super good room, and you're going to have better airflow. Which brings me to another impressive thing about this Nighthawk, and that's the included fans that Rosewil put on here. I was super impressed by them. They come with 3-pin and Molex connectors in case you just want to get them connected to Molex, you can, but they have the 3-pin if you want to use any kind of fan controller, which is included in the case. They have just 3 speeds, high, medium, and low, but honestly, that's all the speeds you would need in a fan controller. The blue LEDs in the front looked great. The silence, I mean, even at full speed, they're barely noticeable, and I clicked them off to medium right now just to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the video, but they are not obnoxious at all, and they have pretty decent airflow. I don't think they're going to have quite as good an airflow as a Noctua or a Silence, but you're also going to pay twice as much or 3 times as much for a Noctua fan too. So I'm really impressed. The fans are excellent. You've got $120, you've got a full tower case. If you are ever planning on doing Crossfire SLI, you're gonna want full tower. It's really hard to make that work and keep your heat under control in a mid tower. It just is. I know, I've had experience, especially with 2 R9 290s. So honestly, 120 bucks, I think that's a good value. I'd like to see Rosewil just modernize a couple of things. Like I said, I mentioned those Molex connectors. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe the option to get rid of the CD drives so you could have a little extra airflow up top and maybe a little better radiator support. But overall, this is an excellent case, and it definitely earns Pure Overclock's Great Hardware Award. Oh, right, don't want to forget one last thing. The full review is linked below, and subscribe if you like the channel. I'll catch you next time. Guys, let's make America cutting edge again. Let's unannex the Molex, the Hardware Hound 2016.